my screw ups, my mess ups, because he's already prepared for what I might do. He knows what I'm going to do before I do it, and he already made preparation for me before I get there. What follows darkness is light. That darkness is the indicator that light is getting ready to shine. So there it is in Genesis, when darkness was upon the face of the deep, and God in the spirit form moved upon the face of the waters, and then God said, let there be. Because darkness precedes the light. Are you understanding what I'm saying? But he needs the darkness there so that God can move upon the face of the deep, so that the shift can take place. Listen, look at your neighbor and tell your neighbor that shift take place in the darkness. Oh God, y'all didn't hear what I just said. Everybody's not going to see the shift that's happening. They see the chaos, but they don't see the shift. They see all the craziness going on in your life, but they don't understand that underneath the darkness, God is moving in secret. He's moving in quiet. He's moving in the hidden places. He's moving in the cracks and the corners and the crevices. He's moving in places that you cannot see. And when the light comes, they're going to see a new order. But untying. And so the universe then has no choice. First attribute of the secret place. The secret place is a place of revelation. It makes you free because it awakens you and makes you consciously aware that everything that you thought was holding you is an illusion. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Emerge Empowerment Session. I'm your host, Isaac J. Miles Sr., and I am excited, ecstatic, and overjoyed that you've decided to join me this morning for this conscious conversation. Those of you who are watching by way of Facebook as well as YouTube Live, please, if you don't mind, just for a moment, just tag and share this particular broadcast with as many people as you possibly can. I need you to stop right now and do that. Go ahead and copy the link, those of you who are watching on YouTube, and then share it in your group chats and amongst your friends and families. Then tell everybody that we are live and on the air right now. Those of you watching on Facebook, go ahead and begin to tag as many of your friends and families and onlookers, if you will, in the comments, and invite them to come and be a part of this conscious conversation that is a bit controversial. And we didn't plan this out in this way, but it just seemed to coincide with one of the great leaders, apostles, kings, trailblazers in the faith, Bishop Carlton Pearson's transition, who, as a result of his more expanded consciousness and thoughts around this particular subject matter, we all know suffered some devastating losses, but a rebirthing that introduced him to an entire different audience and really catapulted him to a level where he ministered to people all around the world, and not just those of the Christian fundamentalist belief. So it is also comical to me just how the synchronicities work as far as dealing with these type of things. I had someone to challenge me yesterday on Facebook on the very topic that we're going to be discussing today. You know, I find great entertainment in these Google, Facebook, pseudo-theologians who come and want to begin to challenge me and others on things that they really clearly have no clue on, except for the dogma that they've been given their entire life and they are entrenched with. And so whenever they are challenged with any factual, historical, logical information, they revert back to those old ideologies and begin to throw out insults and other things of that sort, because they really cannot answer the questions, or they can't deal with factual information. But we deal with facts over here. We deal with facts. We're not apologists for any particular ideology or religious belief. We deal with facts, you know, and I encourage those of you who listen to employ your capacity for critical thinking, and to do your own research and to do your own study and to do your own reading. And so while I may give you a pile of information, as I'm going to give you today, so it is imperative that you take the information and that you research it for yourself, and then you embrace what you can embrace, and what you cannot, then lay it to the side and keep it moving. Adopt what works for you. But I can assure you that I put forth a lot of time, research, and painstaking effort to make sure that what I present to you is accurate and factual, to the very, very best of my ability. And that's why it's so much information. And I know I've gotten some feedback from some of you saying that, you know, you're really enjoying it, but it's just so much to digest. And others have asked me to slow it down a bit, and I'm going to try my best to slow down and not
run through it as fast as I have been, but at the same time, there is a lot of ground to cover. And I really, really want to try and get through this entire series before we end this calendar year. So that gives us just, I think, 4 more. Is there a 5th Sunday this month? Anybody know? Let me see. Let me pull up the calendar real quick. For some reason, it's not popping up right there. Let me look over here. 1, 2, 3. Oh, yeah, there is a 5th Sunday. So that leaves us just 5 Sundays to try and get through all of this information. Okay. Now, if you've missed any, because I'm not going to go back and review in detail what we've already covered. We completed section 1 last week. That section being on LSD, the hallucinogenic drug that causes you to have visions and fantasies and delusions of something that's not really there, more so Lucifer, Satan, and the devil. And we discovered the origin of all of those 3, that they're not the same, and their origin and their original meaning and what they represent in the Bible. And if you want to get more information about that, you missed those, then the videos are still up on YouTube. It's also up on my page. You can go back and you can watch those videos and catch up on all of that information, because I really cannot go back and review all of that. I want to move forward with the conversation today. Today we begin section 2 of the mythology of evil. Before we dealt with section 1 was LSD, Lucifer, Satan, and the devil. Today we're going to begin section 2 of the mythology of evil, and it is the delusions of dungeons, demons, and devils, the keys to freedom from the fear of things that go bump in the night, i.e. death, hell, and invisible enemies. So we're going to really hone down and focus on the mythology around hell today. And as I said, it is a lot of information to cover. I will try and be as succinct and detailed and comprehensive as I can be in this conversation. I will try and pace it at a optimal pace where everybody's able to keep up. But if I move too quickly or go past something that you didn't quite get and you need me to repeat it or to expound upon it, then please write in the comments. Do it quickly so that I'm able to see it, and I will do so as quick as I possibly can until you get an understanding. The most important thing in doing all of this, I'm not having these conversations just to hear myself talk or for some egoic reason. It is so that we can all get an understanding, and all thy getting, get understanding. And so I don't want to just throw out a particular phrase without giving you substance to be able to back up what I say to you and give you some evidence, some hardcore facts that you're able to research for yourselves. Okay, so it is imperative that we get an understanding. One of I think one of the biggest issues that we find in religions today, and I want to say specifically Christianity because it's the one I'm most familiar with, is that we have been taught to believe a whole lot of things over the years, yet we have no clue as to why we believe what we believe. We're not even sure of the what that we believe, but the things that we think we're sure of, as far as I know I believe this, if you ask the average Christian, why do you believe it? Their only response is normally, well, because the Bible says so. and and then if you ask them, well, where in the Bible? It's in there. I know it's in there. They can't tell you. Or if they do tell you, you find a few that can come up with a couple of scriptures that they will take completely out of context without any form of examination, analysis, or exegesis. They just grab a scripture that seems to fit and throw it out there and say, well, the Bible say. Is that what it really says? Or is that what you've been told it says? Well, in this study, we are looking at the biblical view, but we are putting it within the context of the men who wrote it, as well as the other historical information that surrounds that particular thing, or subject matter, and showing you the progression of thought and the etymology of a lot of these words, terminologies, phrases, ideologies that we have held so dear. Remember the motto: ask questions, get answers, and then question the answers. Ask questions, get answers, and then question the answers. That's the key to growth. That's the key to your evolutionary journey and becoming expanded in your perspective, perception, and conscious view of how you navigate this three-dimensional experience that we call life. All right, so let's get to it. Let's jump right in. We're going to deal with the delusions of dungeons, demons, and devils. More specifically, the mythology of hell. Now, like I said, there's a lot of back and forth and controversy that's taking place right now. It's happened several times throughout the years, but it is at a heightened level again now with the passing and the transition of Bishop Carlton Pearson. And so this subject has now come back to the forefront, and people are once again having the debate as to the legitimacy of the whole theology around hell, around this subterranean dungeon and torture chamber that lasts for eternity, with the supervisor called the devil that is there holding and tormenting people forever and ever and ever and ever. And the conversation ranges from the inquisitive and the curious to the completely ridiculous and asinine and infantile. We're not going to walk to that end of the spectrum, okay? The asinine, the infantile, the stupid and ridiculous are usually reserved for those who are so tied and tethered and entrenched in a particular religious ideology, they turn off their brain, suspend all logic, and just accept as whole cloth what they have been taught or told their entire life by those who simply, honestly, didn't know any better. They just simply taught what they had been taught. Okay? But we're going to dig in and deal with evidence-based research and then see how we arrived at the particular idea that we have concerning hell. Now, let me say at the onset and make very clear, this is a misconception that was cast upon Bishop Pearson as well. People say, well, Carlton doesn't believe in hell. Bishop Pearson doesn't believe in hell. That is not what he said. He never said that. Never said that he did not believe in hell. I'm not saying that I don't believe in hell. what he said and what I align myself with as well is that he did not, and I do not believe in the Christian fundamentalist view and perception of hell. I do not believe that hell is a subterranean torture chamber where souls are cast into and tormented and tortured throughout eternity. I do believe in hell, but not that version of hell. And I'll explain what that terminology means, its application in real world application to all of us. I do not believe in this torture chamber that God has somehow set aside this torture chamber where it can practice masochism and sadism and torture and pain and torment and maliciousness, supervised by the devil to torment people forever and ever and ever without end. I absolutely reject that idea because it's based upon a myth. It's based upon a fraud. It is based upon a lie. Okay? So, in this conversation about hell, let's go back and let's begin with the target audience of the book that is most often used to substantiate this idea of hell. That's the Bible. The target audience of this book, and I know this is probably going to upset some people as well, are the Jewish people. It was not written with the intent or the target of any other people than the Jewish people. That's what it's centered around. And we've already dealt with that whole ideology, erroneous belief of the Jewish people being chosen by God, that it flies in the face of what and who God really is, that God doesn't play favorites. God doesn't have a select group. Okay, I favor these over the other. So, we know that that's not the case. But this is a book written, a book that centers the Jewish people at the center of the conversation and the stories and all of the analogies that are within the book. Now, we understand that the Bible is a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. So we don't even have, you're not carrying around an original text. You're carrying around a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. That has been translated in through several different iterations and arrived at the book you have now, and it's still being translated. But let's begin with Judaism and their concept of hell. I'm sorry, Bishop Christian would say he believes in something you go through, not something you go to. Exactly. That hell is something you go through and not something you go to. He did say that. Okay. And I believe that as well. But let's go back. Let's go back. All right. So let's begin with Judaism. Early Judaism had no concept of hell, although the concept of an afterlife was introduced during the Hellenistic period, apparently from neighboring Hellenistic religions. It occurs, for example, in the book of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 2, proclaiming, "And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." So they have this ideology or this belief in an afterlife, but they had no real concept of hell. The early Jewish people in early Judaism had no concept of hell. There was never a concept, an idea, a belief in an afterlife that was filled with torment and torture. They did believe in an afterlife, but none of their beliefs around the afterlife included anything that resembled hell. Judaism, and I'm covering up part of the notes here, so I'll take myself out of the picture for a second. Judaism does not have a specific doctrine about the afterlife, but it does have a mystical Orthodox tradition of describing Gehenna. Gehenna is not hell. I should have put that in capital letters. Let me say it again. Gehenna is not hell. But originally it was the grave, and in a latter times a sort of purgatory where one is judged based on one's life's deeds, or rather where one becomes fully aware of one's shortcomings and negative actions during one's life. The Kabbalah explains it as a waiting room, commonly translated as an entryway for all souls, not just the wicked souls, but for all souls. The overwhelming majority of rabbinic thought maintains that people are not in Gehenna forever. The Jewish people never believed that even Gehenna, which was the passageway or this place of purgatory, was not a place where you spent eternity. Okay? The longest that one can be there is said to be up to 12 months. However, there has been the occasional noted exception. Some consider it a spiritual forge where the soul is purified for its eventual ascent to Olam Hebab, or what we would call heaven, the world to come, often viewed, like I said, analogous to heaven. This is also mentioned in the Kabbalah, where the soul is described as breaking, like the flame of a candle lighting upon another, the part of the soul that ascends being pure and unfinished, and the unfinished piece being reborn. Okay? This is what Judaism, early Judaism taught, and many of Jews still hold to be true today, is that the soul enters Gehenna, grave, or a sort of purgatory where they are held for a certain period of time, made aware and consciously aware of their shortcomings and errors, and then eventually the soul is split in two, where there is the part of the soul that is pure, that ascends into what they call the world to come, and the other part is reborn. The unfinished part is reborn. Okay? Let's move on. According to Judaism, Jewish teaching, hell is not entirely physical. Rather, it can be compared to a very intense feeling of shame. Let me say that again. According to Jewish teaching, hell is not entirely physical. Rather, it can be compared to a very intense feeling of shame, something you go through and not to. People are shameful of their misdeeds, and this constitutes a suffering which makes up for the bad deeds. When one has so deviated from the will of God, one is said to be in Gehenna. This is not meant to refer to some point in the future, but to the very present moment that they're in right at that moment. The gates of Teshuvah, return, have said to always be open so that one can align his will with that of God at the moment. Being out of alignment with God's will is itself a punishment according to the Torah. So you understand that in the Jewish teaching that you would enter Gehenna, that intense feeling of guilt or shame because of being out of alignment with God, disobeying the will of God, but the gate of return was always open. Even that, Gehenna, that place of feeling shame and embarrassment and humiliation because of being out of the will of God, was not eternal. There was always a way of escape. There is no temptation taken you, but such is common unto man. There was always a way of escape, a gate of return where you could come back into alignment with God and therefore leave Gehenna. Okay? Being out of alignment with God was the torment or the punishment itself. According to the Torah, according to the Talmud, just being out of the will of God, being out of the alignment with God, being out of sync with the divine was considered torment itself. That was the punishment. There was not an eternal place where you spent the rest of eternity in torture or in torment. It was the feeling that you would experience when you had stepped outside of the will of God. That was considered the punishment and the torment. Many scholars of Jewish mysticism, particularly of the Kabbalah, make mention of the 7 compartments or habitations of hell. Just as there are 7 divisions of heaven, their divisions go by many different names, and the most frequently mentioned are the ones that I'm about to give you right now. Okay? 7 compartments or 7 habitations of hell. This is what the mythology or the mysticism based on the Kabbalah in the Jewish faith is. These are the 7 that are mentioned most often. Sheol, the Hebrew word for underworld, Hades, or grave. Abaddon, doesn't that sound familiar? You heard that term used in the book of Revelation as well, which means the son of, not son of perdition, but just perdition and doom. Bere Shachat, I probably butchered that, which means the pit of corruption. Titha Yavin, might have butchered that one as well, which means to be clinging to the mud. Sha'ar Mavet, I got that right, I know, which is the gates of death. And the Zalmavet, I got that one right, which is the shadow of death. And of course, Gehenna, which is the valley of Hinnom, Tartarus, or purgatory. Okay? These are the 7 terms that are most often used by the early Judaism and present-day Judaism to describe what we call hell, and what was translated as the word hell, one singular word. Did you notice that these 7 Jewish terms are all translated to one singular term? How did that come about? Was there some underlying agenda? There absolutely was. Okay? Let's keep going. We'll get there. If you need more time to write these down, well, you got the video. You can go back and run it back and write them down. I hope that you're taking notes and that you're keeping pace with what we're doing and how far we're going. Okay? Now, let's go to the ancient Egyptians, upon which most of what we believe and many of the stories in our Bible, as well as in the Talmud, as well as in the Torah, were borrowed. Ancient Egypt, with the rise of the cult of Osiris, during the Middle Kingdom of the democratization of religion, offered to even the humblest followers the prospect of eternal life, with moral fitness becoming the dominant factor in determining a person's suitability. At death, a person faced judgment by the tribunal of 42 divine judges. If they led a life in conformance with the precepts of the goddess Maat, who represented truth and right living, the person was welcomed into the heavenly reed fields. If found guilty, the person was thrown into Amit, the devourer of the dead, and would be condemned to the lake of fire. Sound familiar? They would be condemned to the lake of fire. This began in ancient Egypt, which predates the Bible. The person taken by the devourer is subject first to the terrifying punishment and then annihilation. Does that sound familiar? That concept, that ideology, is not original to the Bible. It's not even found in Judaism, but it is original to ancient Egypt. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Okay? Let's go on. These depictions of punishment may have influenced medieval perceptions of the inferno in hell via Christian and Coptic texts. Purification for those considered justified appears in the descriptions of the Flame Island, where humans experience the triumph over evil and rebirth. For the damned, complete destruction into a state of non-being awaits there, but there is no suggestion of eternal torture. Let's say that again. For the damned, the complete destruction into a state of non-being awaits. It's annihilation. But there is no suggestion of an ongoing, perpetual, eternal torture. They would weigh the heart. The weighing of the heart in the Egyptian mythology can lead to annihilation. It does not lead to eternal torment. It leads to annihilation. Okay? The tale of Cashapp describes the torment of a rich man who lacked charity when he dies, and compares it to the blessed state of a poor man who also died. Divine pardon is at judgment always remained a central concern of ancient Egypt. Let me read that again. It is the tale of Cashapp. I keep mispronouncing this. Cashapp, that describes the torment of a rich man who lacked charity when he dies, and he compares this to the blessed state of a poor man who also died. That should sound very familiar to you again. This particular story analogy is borrowed by the New Testament writer and put in the New Testament about another rich man and another poor man called Lazarus. And the rich man dies, and the poor man dies. And the poor man is carried to the bosom of Abraham, and the rich man is cast into hell. Y'all know this story. You've been in church for any length of time. You've heard this story. Not an original story. Its origin is in ancient Egyptian mythology. Ancient Egyptian mythology. Yet, in the original story, Egyptian mythology, in the original story, a divine pardon at judgment always remained as a central concern for ancient Egyptians. There was always a way of escape. In the New Testament retelling of the story, the rich man says, let me go back and warn my brother. He's like, no, you can't go back. Once you're in, you're there forever. Well, that was a departure from the original story or analogy. In the original analogy that comes from ancient Egypt, there was always a way of escape, the possibility of receiving a pardon and being able to come out of that place of torment before annihilation. Let's move on. The modern understanding of Egyptian notations of hell rely on 6 ancient texts from Egypt. The Book of Two Ways, the Book of Amduat, the Book of Gates, the Book of the Dead. That's the one most people are most familiar with, the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Book of the Earth, and the Book of the Caverns. Now, I'm not going to go into detail explaining what each book contains and what they're about, but I'm just giving you the list of them, and you can go and research each of these books. You can actually find copies of these books online or in some libraries who have very rare and old text. You can get copies of these books that you can read for yourself. Okay? But the modern understanding of Egyptian notions of hell, their idea of hell, their concept where hell is concerned, relies on these 6 books. I'll leave those up there for a few minutes more before I move on. Let me repeat them again. The Book of Two Ways, the Book of Amduat, or the Hidden Room, the Book of the Underworld, the Book of Gates, several gates, the Book of the Dead, the Book of the Earth, and finally, the Book of Caverns. Okay, let's keep going. Now, in Greek mythology, in Greek, the main article is Tartarus. Tartarus. And again, I might be mispronouncing, but that's roughly how it's pronounced, Tartarus. In the classic Greek mythology, below heaven, earth, and Pontus is Tartarus. It is either a deep, gloomy place, a pit, or an abyss used as a dungeon of torment and suffering that resides inside of Hades, or the underworld, with Tartarus being the hellish component. In the Gorgias, Plato writes that the souls were judged after death, and those who received punishment were sent to Tartarus as a place of punishment. It can be considered hell. The classic Hades, on the other hand, is more similar to the Old Testament Sheol. But we get our first introduction to a place of some type of torment or torture with Greek mythology and the idea of Tartarus. In Europe, the hells of Europe include Breton mythology, Anion; in Celtic mythology, Ifrin; in Slavic mythology, Peklo; in the hell of the Semi mythology and the Finnish is, and I know I'm going to butcher this one, Tuonilia. I think that's how it's Tuonilia rather. Tuonilia. Okay? In Asia, the hells of Asia include the Bagabu, Gimokodan. In the ancient mythology is Kalichi. I know I have that one right because I visited several Indian reservations and we discussed Kalichi, Naraka. In folklore around the Anu people, hell is below ground and is described as an uninviting, wet place reserved for sinful people. Also, Dahu and Daoist hell. Okay? All of these are different nationalities and cultures' view and concept of this thing that we call hell. So you see, it's not just a Christian ideology or concept. It's not just a European concept. As a matter of fact, the Europeans came up with theirs centuries later, after the ancient Egyptians and after early Judaism as well. Excuse me, took a sip of coffee. Now let's get back to Christian theology. And I think I can fit on here. I'll move myself in a moment here. In Christian theology, hell is the place or state into which God's definitive judgment unrepentant sinners pass either immediately after death, particularly judgment, or in general judgment. The character is inferred from teachings in the biblical text, some of which, interpreted literally, have given rise to the popular idea of hell. Theologians today generally see hell as the logical consequence of using free will to reject union with God, and because God will not force conformity, not incompatible with God's justice and mercy. However, different Hebrew and Greek words are translated as hell in most English language Bibles. They include Sheol, the Hebrew word, and Hades in the New Testament. Most modern versions, such as the New International Version, translate Sheol as the grave, simply translate Hades. Hades. It is generally agreed that both Sheol and Hades do not typically refer to the place of eternal punishment, but to the grave, the temporary abode of the dead, or the underworld. Let me say that again. Sheol in the Hebrew Bible and Hades in the New Testament. Most modern versions, such as the New International Version, translate Sheol as grave and simply translate Hades. It is generally agreed that both Sheol and Hades do not typically refer to the place of eternal punishment, but to the grave, the temporary abode of the dead or the underworld. Another word that's used in the New Testament is Gehenna, from Gehinnom in the New Testament. It describes a place where both the soul and the body could be destroyed. That's in Matthew chapter 10, verse 28. Don't fear what man can do to you, but fear falling into the hand of God, who can cast you into this place where both the body and soul is destroyed. It is also described as an unquenchable fire in Mark chapter 9, verse 43. The word is translated as either hell or hellfire in many English versions. However, we've learned that Gehenna or Gehinnom was actually a literal place, not in the center of the earth, not underneath the ground, but a place outside of Jerusalem. Let's keep going. The Greek word also, Tartarus, which occurs in the New Testament one time in 2 Peter 2 and 4, is always translated by a phrase such as thrown into hell. A few translations render it as Tartarus. Of them, the term of this term, the Holman Christian Standard Bible states Tartarus is a Greek name for a subterranean place of divine punishment lower than Hades. In ancient Jewish belief, the dead were consigned to Sheol, a place to which all were sent indiscriminately. Genesis chapter 37, verse 35, Numbers chapter 16, verses 30 through 33, Psalms chapter 86, verse 13, Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 10. Sheol was thought of as a place situated between the ground, Ezekiel 31 and 15, a place of darkness, silence, and forgetfulness, according to Job chapter 10, verse 21. By the 3rd century BC, the idea had grown to encompass separate divisions in Sheol for the righteous and the wicked. This is in the book of Enoch. You won't find that in your King James Version, but it is a part of the lost books of the Bible. And by the time of Jesus, some Jews had come to believe that those in Sheol awaited the resurrection of the dead either in comfort, that is, in Abraham's bosom, or in torment. And again, you can go back and rewatch all of this, get all of these texts down, go and research them for yourself. By at least the late rabbinical period, Gehinnom was viewed as the place of ultimate punishment, exemplified by the rabbinical statement that said, the best of the physicians are detained in Gehinnom, are destined rather to Gehinnom. Also described as assumptions of Moses and 2nd Ezra, the term is derived from Gia ben Hinnom. The term Gehinnom is derived from Gia ben Hinnom, which was a valley near Jerusalem originally used as a location for human sacrifice to the idol Molech. It was a dump. It was a place where they threw their waste, and a place where people would offer sacrifices to the idol god of Moloch. And he defiled the Tophet, which is in the valley of Ben Hinnom. No man might make his son or his daughter pass through the fire of Molech. You find that in 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 10. Jeremiah 32 and 35 says, "And they built the high place of Baal, which are in the valley of Ben Hinnom, to cause their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire of Molech, which I did not command them, nor did it come into mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin." So we see that Gia Ben Hinnom, or Gehinnom, was an actual place outside of Jerusalem where they threw their waste and their garbage and their filth, and where they made idol sacrifices to an idol god Moloch. Okay? It was not this torture chamber under the ground that went on for eternity. So when Jesus is heard speaking about people being cast into hell, he is speaking metaphorically, using the valley of Gehinnom as a metaphor, a place of waste and degradation, and a place of sacrifices to false or idol gods. It is not talking about some place under the earth or a torture chamber with a supervisor named Satan. In the Greek Septuagint, the Hebrew word Sheol is translated as Hades, the name for the underworld and the abode of the dead in Greek mythology. The realm of eternal punishment in the Hellenistic period was Tartarus. Hades was a form of limbo for the unjudged dead. In the New Testament canon, Christ referred to Gehenna, the valley of Hinnom, where garbage burned continuously, corpses were sometimes disposed of, and in early times people had been sacrificed there. He only referred to it to illustrate his lesson about spiritual growth and the earthly realm, that the earthly body was meaningless and would be thrown on the garbage dump. Some suggest that he was warning the entire Jewish nation that it must turn away from earthly focus and reform by being more concerned with spiritual growth and the inner person, and if it didn't, the Jews would be destroyed in fire, which he was right, because Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed with fire by being torched in 70 CE. So he spoke prophetically about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem and all of Jerusalem if they did not turn away from their focus on earthly things and began to be more concerned about spiritual growth. And that prophecy came to pass in 70 CE. However, I think I should, still don't have enough room from just me. However, he didn't refer to hell as an everlasting torment for people who didn't swear allegiance to him. You never find any text anywhere where Jesus says, if you don't believe in me, you're going to hell. If you don't align yourself with me, you're going to hell. He never refers to hell as an everlasting torment for people who didn't swear allegiance to him. By the time of the first English translation of the New Testament, the hell myth had been so well rooted in church tradition that where the translator saw Gehenna, they simply inserted the word hell as the translation, which was not the translation. Am I saying there's a mistake in translation in your Bible? Absolutely. There are a lot of mistakes and contradictions in the Bible. We've had this conversation before. That led to the misconception about hell being in the New Testament and in Christ's teaching. But in every place, Christ refers to Gehenna, which is not synonymous with hell. It became synonymous with the idea of this subterranean torture chamber, but it was not, as we've seen from the historical record, not synonymous with hell or an underground torture chamber, but that it was synonymous with a land or an area outside of Jerusalem where they dumped the garbage, burned dead bodies, and offered sacrifices to false gods. Yet the idea, you know how it is, that, if you a lie can make it around the world twice before the truth can put its shoes on. Or the old practice you used to do in school where the teacher would whisper one thing to a person at the front of the class, and then each person whispered it to the next person, to the next person, to the next person, and by the time it got to the back of the class, it was completely different from what had been said originally. That is what the Bible is. It is the repeating of stories told, stories borrowed, stories that have been handed down through the oral tradition, repeated and repeated and repeated again, and translated narrowly to fit a narrative that fit an agenda of those who were compiling the book together. The concept of hell, of a hell of torment with these remarkable complexities, did not exist in the church before the church added, the inferno, purgatory, and limbos. Let me say that again. The concept of hell, of the hell of torment with these remarkable complexities, did not exist before the church, that is the Catholic Church, added the inferno, purgatory, and limbos. It simply isn't in the New Testament within the decades prior to 110 CE. It's just not there. I challenge you to research it for yourself. That concept does not exist. Thomas Thayer, a famous theologian, here is his concept or his teaching on hell. From the Origin and the History of the Doctrine of Endless Punishment by Thomas Thayer, written in 1855. He writes, the word hell in the Old Testament is always a translation of the word Sheol, which occurs 64 times and is rendered hell 32 times, grave 29 times, and pit 3 times. By examination of the Hebrew scriptures, it will be found that it is radical and primary. It will be found that its radical and primary meaning is the place or state of the dead. It is plain that it has no reference to a place of endless torment after death. It is plain then from these citations that the word Sheol, hell, makes nothing of the doctrine of future unending torment or punishment as part of the law of penalties. It is never used by Moses or the prophets in the sense of a place of torment after death, and in no way conflicts with the statement already provided, that the law of Moses deals wholly with temporal rewards and punishments. That's from Thomas Thayer. Most of you are familiar with him because you'll see that in your those commentaries in different software that you use, Bible software, and preachers who've gone to any kind of seminaries, you've always studied Thomas Thayer and his commentary. But not just Thayer. This position also I wish to fortify by the testimony of Oxford critics, men of learning and candor who were currently professors of history and theology at Oxford when Thayer wrote, "They know and therefore they speak." Chapman says, now who's a theologian, Sheol in itself considered has no connection with future punishment. Dr. Allen says, the term Sheol does not seem to mean with certainty anything more than the state of the dead in their deep abode. Dr. Campbell says, Sheol signifies the state of the dead without regard to their happiness or misery. Dr. Whitby says, Sheol throughout the Old Testament signifies not the place of punishment or of the souls of bad men only, but the grave only, or the place of death. Dr. Musner says, the souls are shades of the dead's wander in Sheol, the realm or kingdom of death, and abode under the earth. Thither go all men without distinction and hope for no return. There ceases all pain and anguish. There ceases all pain and anguish. There ceases all pain and anguish. There reigns unbroken silence. There all is powerless and still, and even the praise of God is heard no more. And then Von Colin, Sheol itself is described as the house appointed for all living, which receives into its bosom all mankind without distinction of rank, wealth, or moral character. It is only in the mode of death and not in the condition after death that the good are distinguished above the evil. The just, for instance, die in peace and are gently borne away after the evil comes. After a bitter death breaks the wicked like a tree. Every single one of these scholars saw Sheol as a place as the place of the dead or the grave, not a place of eternal torment or punishment or judgment. But let's keep going. Thayer continues, these witnesses all testify that Sheol or hell in the Old Testament has no reference whatsoever to this doctrine that signifies simply the state of the dead, the invisible world, without regard to their goodness or badness, their happiness or misery. The Old Testament doctrine of hell, therefore, is not the doctrine of endless punishment. It is not revealed in the law of Moses. It is not revealed in the Old Testament. To such result has our inquiry led. Now what shall we say of it? He says. He was on the same quest. If then our current, and he was speaking of his time, idea and concept of hell is not based upon any historical context, where did it come from? Even then, in 1855, he was asking the right questions. If that is true, then where does our concept and idea of hell and eternal torment come from? Even the pagans from whom the myth was taken, and this is where we get the mythology of hell, describe the hell myth as a fabrication. Let me say that again. Even the pagans from which we get the whole mythology of hell, even they describe it as a fabrication. The hell myths were taken over bodily from pagan mythology. But even the ancient historians knew the hell myth was a fabrication created to keep the people in line. Polybius, the ancient history called the myth contrived. Here is what he said. Since the multitude is ever fickle, full of lawless desire, irrational passions, and violence, there is no other way to keep them in order but by the fear and terror of the invisible world, on which account our ancestors seem to me to have acted judiciously when they contrived to bring into the popular belief these notions of the gods and of the infernal regions. He comes out and says that they were contrived, that this was a story that was wholly made up. Why? In order to keep people in order, to manipulate and control them. My son says, does it come from the same era as Dante Inferno and the 9 circles of hell? In a brief answer, yes. We're going there right now. Polybius' statements sound very much like the rationale the church had for adopting the hell myth, using it to keep parishioners in line. The famous ancient historian Seneca termed the hell myth as a fable. Those things which make the infernal regions terrible, the darkness, the prison, the river of flaming fire, the judgment seat, etc., are all fables with which poets amused themselves and by them agitate us with vain terror. Watch this. Sextus Empiricus called them poetic fables of hell. Cicero called them as silly absurdities and fables. Strabo, the ancient geographer, described the same justification for the punishments the gods are said to inflict upon offenders, calling the creations superstitions. The multitude are restrained from vice by the punishments the gods are said to inflict upon the offenders, and by those terrors and threatening which certain dreadful words and monstrous forms imprint upon their minds. For it is impossible to govern the crowd of women and the common rabble by philosophical reason and lead them to piety, holiness, and virtue, but this must be done by superstition or the fear of gods by means of fables and wonders, for the thunders and the aegis and the trident and the torches, or the furies and the dragons, etc., all which are fables, also is also in the ancient theology. These things the legislators use as scarecrows to terrify the childish multitude. They came up with these fables, fantasies, and mythologies as a means to be able to scare people into what they considered holiness or piousness or righteousness, since they had so many legalistic rules and dogma that most would have just cast aside and said it's impossible, it's ridiculous, it's too much. They created this concept around all of these torturous places and spirits and demons and devils and dungeons and dragons to scare people straight, like taking kids into a prison and having the prisoners yell at them to scare them straight. They created this fantastic world of fantasies and mythology in order to manipulate and control the masses and get them to become obedient. These fables and myths were taken up eagerly by the church to convert unbelievers and keep the believers in line, even though the pagan writers themselves thought them to be ridiculous and said clearly these are fables. Clearly, these are all mythological ideas that they dreamed up. Yet the church said, hey, this is a useful tool. The Catholic Church, this is a useful tool. This is a good way to convert unbelievers and a good way to keep all of the believers in line, marching in line, following the doctrine and the order. We'll scare the hell out of them, or we'll scare the hell into them. We'll frighten the hell into them, and that'll keep them in line. So the development of hell comes along through the Middle Ages. And this is where, William, what you were talking about. The concept of hell described by the writers of the 2nd century and 3rd century church continued to be embellished throughout the rest of the millennium unto the Middle Ages. The Roman Catholic thinkers in the Middle Ages developed a series of levels of hell, all with no biblical basis. Let me repeat that. The Roman Catholic thinkers in the Middle Ages developed a series of levels of hell with no biblical basis. They were infernus, purgatory, limbo, baptism, and the limbo of infants, and the limbo of the patriarchs, not baptisms. Baptism was how you escaped. Infernus was the place of torment for the unrighteous, damned, and the demons. This is the place one most often thinks of when you hear the word hell. Purgatory is where the saved souls go to be purged of their temporal effects and of their sin. The limbo of the infant, limbus infinitum, a place of perfect natural subjugation, happiness, to which those who died before baptism are also denied the beatific vision, but who have not committed any personal sin, babies, so don't warrant punishment. This is where they go. Babies go to the limbo of the infants, and then the limbo of the patriarch, limbus patrium, where the righteous who lived before Jesus came to the earth. This is where all the Moses, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all of the rest of them are, according to the Catholic Church. That's where they went. It is in this part of quote unquote hell that Christ descended into and that no longer exists. That you've heard that story where he descended into hell and set the captives free. Well, that comes from Jewish mythology. It was added by the Roman Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. The primary images of hell we have today, watch this. This is your part, William. The primary images of hell we have today come from the poet Dante in the Divine Comedy. The primary images of hell we have today come from the poet Dante in the Divine Comedy. Dante takes the reader through the three realms of the dead: hell, purgatory, and paradise. The poet develops places for every type of person, allowing him to editorialize about people's actions in the world of his day. In the process, he creates a vivid scenes of hell, purgatory, and paradise. Those then became the basis of virtually all the artistic depictions of hell in the Middle Ages and our modern concept of hell, which are demons, torment, and fire. All of it is poetry. None came from the Bible. Let me say that again. None of the ideas and concepts and the pictures that we have and the descriptions that we have of hell came from the Bible. They were written and created by Dante in a divine comedy, fiction, mythology. Mythology borrowed from pagans, just like Christmas and Easter. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Did he say Christmas and Easter? Yes, I did. All borrowed from paganism. And then, after Dante, came Milton, John Milton. Milton's Paradise Lost ended the embellishment of hell, both because of the masterpiece Milton had created and because not much more could be originated that Dante and Milton hadn't already created through the genius of their imagination. If the church had created hell, Dante and Milton furnished, decorated, and populated it. Let me say it again. If the church created hell, which the Catholic Church did, our version, Dante and Milton, they furnished, decorated, and populated it. The church was delighted with the horrific images that would frighten the flock into submission and encourage conversion through fear, so it adopted them into, I put two. They adopted them in total, is what it should have said. The fact that the images were biblical was a meaningless detail. The fact that these images were not biblical, not were, it didn't even matter to them. They didn't care. They just added in what they wanted to add and created this mythology. It's the same mythology. It is the same lie. It is the same gross embellishment that the church continues to practice and exercise to this very day. The black church grabbed on to the Catholic Church's ideology and concept of hell, took all the furniture, the decorations, and the population, and added even more flame to it. Because you know how we can be descriptive. You know, we're the ones who, when Jesus died, he unscrewed the stars from the silvery sockets in glory, and Jesus, God scooped down in the earth and spit out the ocean. You know, we get real creative. Black folk, we know how to pile it on, child. We can dress it up and have it just, Lord have mercy. So we took the Catholic Church decorations and furniture. They took Dante's structure, took the pagans' creation, and we just added a whole nother flair to that thing. And now we got the devil and hell and death and torture and chambers and and Lucifer and everybody else running through hell, and had Jesus go into hell and take the sword off the devil's side and say and the keys from his side and say, all power, yeah, all power. I'm laughing because I've said that too. I certainly have while preaching when you get ready to close. All of a sudden, the devil looked up and here comes Jesus walking through hell, snatched the keys of death, hell, and the grave from his side. All power! It makes for a great story. You know you done shouted, danced, spoke in tongues, and fell out. And then Sunday morning. Oh my goodness, you know you done fell out and spoke in tongues and rolled in spit bubbles and jumped over pews. All based on a fairy tale, a mythology, a lie, a fantasy. The vivid imaginations of both Milton and Dante, and the original idea coming from the pagans. Nothing to do with God. Nothing to do with God. Nothing to do with the Bible. Nothing to do with the original text. Nothing to do with facts. It's just a tool of manipulation. And listen to me, ladies and gentlemen. Let me take this down right now, and I'm just me. Okay. Listen to me. Listen to me very carefully. To this day, I know I was laughing, having a little fun with it. But please understand that to this day, the mythology surrounding Lucifer, Satan, and the devil, which we've already covered, this mythology around hell, eternal torment, eternal damnation, fire and brimstone, are still being used to this day for the original intent that the Middle Ages, the Catholics in the Middle Ages created, to manipulate and to control the masses. The church, the black church, the Christian church, the evangelical church, are more devoted to the devil and hell than they are to Jesus. I said it. I said it. Are more devoted, more dedicated, more committed to the devil and hell than they are to Jesus and the idea of heaven. Than they are to God. I even posed a question a couple of times on my Facebook page over the past few years. If there was no hell and no devil, what would you preach? And I was surprised, sadly surprised and shocked at the number of people and preachers who said there wouldn't be nothing left to preach then. There's really nothing else to preach if you're not preaching hell and the devil. If you don't have the devil and hell and eternal damnation, then what's the point? I posed another question and said, well, if there was no hell, so therefore no possibility of going to hell, how would you live? And the number one response is, oh, so you just mean that everybody can just live however they want to live and do whatever it is that they want to do without any consequences? Do you hear the mindset? That mindset of victimization? That mindset of being controlled and manipulated? That mindset of there's got to be this rule, this iron fist above me. If not, then what's the point of living right? which is a misnomer, an oxymoron. There's no living right. Living right is living the life that best suits you, that exalts and aligns with your highest vision and version of yourself, that expresses your divinity in all its fullness in the earth. Then you're living right. It's not a set of rules, regulations, and regimens. It's not a set of patterns that you follow in order to escape this mythological torture chamber. But living right is living in alignment with the truth of God and your own divinity as it aligns with the highest vision and version of yourself, of who you choose to be. All these rules, regulations, dogma, legalisms that religion throws at you are all bull. I'll say it again. They are all bull, and they use the whip of an imaginary hell and death and the grave and the devil and Lucifer and Satan to whip you in line and make sure you follow their rules. Because you notice how the disposition of God and the disposition of the devil is subject to the person that's speaking. Come on. I'm here to tell you that God said he's getting tired of this, that, and the other. Really? First, let's just deal with the idea of God being tired. How does the eternal, ethereal spirit of God now is tired and weary and worn out and can be provoked to being pissed off and angry and vengeful? God is tired. No, it's not God that's tired. They tired. They mad about something. They're upset with something. So they superimpose God on their anger and their ego and say God is getting tired. Or they absolve you from all responsibility of your own choices by saying, well, the devil and the enemy and a demon and the spirit is doing this, that, and the other to you, and this, that, and attacking you and on your track and trying to turn you back and then flipping and flopping and rubbing and trying to take you out into it's manipulation. The devil is a good foil for when you don't want to take responsibility for your own choices and decisions and the consequences of your actions. So you got a good foil that you can always run to and say, well, it's the devil. The devil did this, trick me, deceive me, led me astray. Oh, but God, come fight for me and rescue me from the power of the enemy. Yes, shabba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. I got to make sure I live right because I don't want to go to hell. So you are making your choices about living not out of love, desire, not out of the purity of your heart, but just simply out of fear. I'm scared of going to hell. Ooh, you see how hot it is outside, child? I can't go to hell because this heat right here about to take me out. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to go to hell. So it's not that I don't desire to do it. It's not that I don't really want to do it. It's not that I'm not drawn to it. It's simply that, no, I'm scared to do that because I don't want to go to hell. Now, how does that align with all things are lawful, but not all things are expedient? If everything is lawful, if everything is allowable, if everything is acceptable, even though it may not be expedient, that is, that it does not lend itself or align itself with my highest good, then how can it now align with the idea, but if I do this, he's going to send me to hell? And here is the other one. How in the name of common sense do you wrap your brain around the idea that you can come to Jesus, accept him as your Savior, receive the baptism of the Shandeke Obasa, Holy Ghost, and then follow all of the rules for 10 years, 15, 20 years. And then on the 20th year, you decide that you're going to do a little something on the side. And you die before you get a chance to repent. Those whole 20 years are just wiped out because of that one action, and you going to hell. But I was doing good for 20 years. I got horny and I wanted me a piece. So I went and got me some and had a heart attack in the midst of how did he die on top of me? I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. Color purple. Okay. And now this God says, I don't care about all that goodness that you did before. You're going to hell. Not for a little while. Forever. For eternity, you gonna burn, and the worm doesn't die, and the fire and the brimstone gonna just eat you alive. It doesn't even make logical sense. It makes absolutely no logical sense. That's how contradictory we are. And let's just think about the place where the worm dies not. So there are worms living in hell. How do worms survive in a flame that's burning that hot? And what more damage could a worm do than the fire? If I got to choose between the worm and the fire, give me the worms, baby. I can It's like, what? Let's try this one on for size. The fire is burning with fire and brimstone. But in order to go to hell, you have to be absent from the body. And the only thing that fire and brimstone can have an effect on is the body. So, what the hell is hell doing with fire and brimstone? That has no, you can't burn a soul. Fire and brimstone are natural things. They're not supernatural. Or were they allegories? That would make sense. Which means that the whole idea and concept around this hell that was mentioned is an allegory too. Because logically, fire and brimstone are tangible things that burn a tangible body. And you have to be absent from the body in order to go to hell or heaven. Come on, I know I've given you all of the historical that I'm going to give you, and I'm just talking about some of the logical, illogical rather, concepts around this whole idea of hell. Okay? Yes, exactly, Teresa. I just said it. Like, where are these bodies that just burn, but never burn up? But what about Rich Man Dives and Lazarus? Well, you just saw that wasn't the original story. That was borrowed from ancient Egyptian mythology. Are y'all hearing me? Okay. We've covered a lot of ground. We covered everything I wanted to cover this morning. Are there any other questions or comments? Gloria's writing, I'm in the hospital right now. The nurses are listening to you. Chloe, first of all, I am so sorry that you are in the hospital. We are definitely going to join our collective energy together to send out healing vibrations toward you and for swift recovery and for your health and well-being. And I am glad that the nurses are listening in, and tell them they can tune in every Sunday at 9 a.m. And we're going to be doing more of this and getting into more. So go ahead and like the page, follow the page, so that they can always be tuned in and follow along with us. We welcome you to the conversation. Let's continue let's pray for Gloria. Let's make sure that we pray and send out good energy toward Gloria for her health and her swift recovery. Okay. All right. So I think that's it for this morning. We've covered a lot of ground. Are there any questions? I'm still looking at the comments to see if there are any questions that are going to come up before I go. Sorry. Williams asked me, this is my son. I may have missed it, but what was the Bible talking about when it described hell as, the gnashing of teeth? Again, that's another one. That's another one where that whole thing about where the worm dies not and you burn with fire and brimstone and there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay? And that's like grinding your teeth. Again, it's used metaphorically. It is not talking about something literal. And even in the places where Jesus uses that terminology, he is using the whole metaphor or the allegory around the Valley of Gehenna, which was an actual place outside of Jerusalem, where they burned trash and they burned bodies and they offered sacrifices to Molech. Okay? But he was not talking about a place of eternal damnation and torment and torture. It's just not in the book. The whole ideology, the whole concept that we have of hell that's held by the Christian church is all based upon a myth. It's based upon pagan mythology and dressed up by, adopted rather by the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, dressed up by Dante and I just lost his name. Great. I'll put him back up here. Yeah, Milton. Dante and Milton. And then just expanded upon by black preachers. We just added all kind of stuff to it. I tell you, we know how to dress it up good. Okay? So, wait a minute, hold on, before we go. Because I did say, so then what is hell? Demons, devils, good. Because I did say, I'm not saying hell doesn't exist. I'm saying that our concept of hell is a myth. But hell, like demon and like devil, and again, notice that throughout the entire Old Testament, you never see the word demon or devil ever mentioned in the entire Old Testament. So are you telling me for over 6,000 years, demons and devils were just sitting on the sidelines? These little spirit entities just didn't attack Moses, didn't come after Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, didn't go after Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, or none of the Old Testament prophets. No, they just kind of just sat there and said, we're just going to wait around until, Jesus come on the scene, and then we're going to come out. Get real, okay? But those terminologies, demons, devils, hell, are all terminologies that are used allegorically, like when someone says he's got that monkey on his back. Well, you know good and well they're not literally talking about a monkey. Ain't nobody walking around here with no monkey on their back. They're talking about drugs or alcohol, but they use the term monkey. Well, the same thing is true when it talks about demons and devils. It's talking about a mental state. what's my, he's still wrestling with his demons. What are his demons? What do you mean wrestling with his demons? Some habits, some tendencies that he still struggles with and fights with. It's not a spiritual entity. It is a mental mindset that they are fighting with. So it is with hell. You go through hellish and hell situations that are difficult and challenging. They're not eternal, but they are difficult and challenging, but they are temporal and temporary. Like the church put Bishop Carlton Pearson through hell. That was hell. Okay? Many of you have gone through hell. Not a literal place that you go to, but situations and circumstances and challenges you go through. That's your hell. The demon that you're fighting is you, your own mindset, your own perceptions, your own beliefs, those things that are erroneous, that are creating this kind of conflict and inner turmoil from which your bad habits emanate from. That's your demon. Shift your mind. You cast out the demon. When Jesus is said to have encountered the man who had a lunatic spirit, again, allegorical. And so this man speaks with two different parts of his mind, like schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder. Jesus is said to have spoke the word and commanded his mind. Demons go out, and the next thing that is said about the man is he is clothed, has his clothes on, because he had been ripping his clothes off, running around naked, and in his right mind. It was trying to show you right then that the point that the story was trying to make, it was pointing to the man's mental state. Not some spirit or entity roaming around on his insides, but his mental state that had to be corrected. The weapons of our warfare are mighty through God, are not carnal, but are mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. What created the stronghold? The casting down of imaginations, images, imaginations, thoughts, ideas, concepts, bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of the Christ consciousness. Every thought that would exalt itself against the knowledge of God. Every thought, every idea, every image or imagination. Not a spirit, not an entity, not some little dark creature floating around, but the demon is your mind. Those error, misaligned thoughts, disempowering thoughts. That's your demon and devil that you're wrestling with, that you have to pull down, you have to cast down, you got to bring into captivity, you have to cast out. We see it again when Jesus encounters the man at the pool of Bethesda, and he says, "Wilt thou be made whole?" We are given an insight into his mindset with the next response. "I have no man to help me when the water is troubled, to put me in with it, but the other people get down there before me." Jesus does not debate with him nor have a theological conversation. He simply speaks to the man and says, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." Doesn't say I'm casting out a devil. He simply says, "Let me speak to you. Rise, take up your bed and walk." Shift your mindset. Rise, get up. You get up. Jesus didn't pick him up, didn't snatch him up, didn't have the disciples pick him up. He says, man, make the choice to get up from where you're sitting. Take up your bed, shift your mindset. Instead of the bed carrying you, now you start to carry the bed and begin to walk. And when the man heard this thing, his mind came into alignment with truth. He stood up and started moving. Now the man's sitting around a gate that's called Beautiful. Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I unto thee. Rise up and walk. Didn't cast out no devil, wasn't binding up this, that, or the other. All he simply did was they spoke to the man's mind and said, you've been able to walk the whole time. Something and someone convinced you that you were crippled and you couldn't help yourself. But you can. Now help yourself by getting up. Are you hearing what I'm saying? And we see it repeated over and 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 over again. Even when the terminology of a demon or devil or spirit is used, it is speaking in terms of the mind. Not little ghosts, little Caspers running around. Okay? Casper. Yes, Pastor Engelin, who told you you were naked? Okay? That's where it is. Not a literal place that you go to, but something you go through. Not literal little entities floating around, dark spirits floating around in the atmosphere or possessing people. But mindsets, thoughts. That's why you are transformed. Not by the casting out of a demon, not by the speaking in tongues, not by the pouring on of oil and laying on of hands, not by the shaking and falling out on the floor, but by the renewing of your man. You are transformed, metamorphized, taken from one state of existence to another, expanded, grown, accelerated, multiplied by the renewing, the anakinosis of your mind. That's your transformation. That's your deliverance. All these folks, I got a deliverance ministry. They talking about you spitting and upchucking in a bucket. Kiwi, you remember them days, girl? They have us spitting up in buckets. Come on. Oh, it's coming up now. And all that green stuff come up in the bucket. See them demons coming out now. Yeah, glory. He being purged. I can laugh now, but boy, look at him. We used to do that thing. I believed it. And people would bring out them buckets and tissue to open the door. So when we cast out that demon to leave out, like the demons needed a door to be opened in order for them to, they spirits. Why we gotta open the door? I can laugh about it now, boy. I'm telling you, we were stupid. We were just plain stupid. Oh my goodness. I say we because I did it too. I did. Open the door. Wait a minute. Hold on, Kiwi. They wipe you. Like they gonna wipe the demon off of them. We can wipe the demon off you. Yes. And then shake it off our hand. Oh, when you splashing the demon all over these other people. Oh my goodness. you're splashing demons on other people. Put the Bible on their chest, pour oil on their head, sometimes pour it down their throat. Drink this oil. If that don't make you throw up, I don't know what will. We wasn't going to quit until you purged. That demon coming out of here. And the power of suggestion is so strong that people played along with it. Even when they weren't feeling nothing. I know you in there. What's your name? So the person will be like, my name is Lucifer. Oh, God. I'm having too much fun. Lord have mercy. I'm laughing at myself because I did everything you hear me saying. I've done it before. Every single one of them guilty as charged. I did it. I sure did. I sure did. And believed it to be so. There's a term for that. How do we account for all of these manifestations that people are legitimately having, where you see and experience and hear? How do you account for that? There's a term for that we're going to deal with in our next section. Okay, I'm not going to get into it today because I'm way over time. Gloria, we done went a whole 2 hours. So you should be very happy. Okay? Our next section in our next session, we'll talk about how we account for these manifestations. My daughter likes to look at these documentaries about haunted houses, and she's looking at these ones about like the Amityville house, and these are all supposedly based on true stories, and people having real manifestations of what they call poltergeist, demons or devils and spirits. How do you account for that? People say, well, I saw this with my own eyes. And they did. Absolutely did. I saw things with my own eyes. Absolutely did. Undeniable. Saw it. So how do you account for that? There's a word for that entire experience. And we're going to talk about that in our next session on Sunday at 9 a.m. Lord have mercy. I have laughed too hard this morning. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Listen, I need your support this week. Those of you who can and will support this platform through your giving, please take advantage of the means that you see on your screen right now. I need to hear from all of you that are still on right now, and then those who are watching by replay as well. If you are benefiting from these empowerment sessions and this powerful lesson that we have been going into great detail to bring you a comprehensive look at the mythology of evil. And there are still 2 more sections that we're going to go through. If you've benefited from it, then I'm going to ask you to sow your best seed, to give your best offering, to show your appreciation for what you're receiving from this platform by giving via our Cashapp or Zelle, whatever your gift is, large or small. But to do that and do it right now while you're thinking about it, while we're still on the air, pick up your phone, open up your Zelle in your banking mobile app or your Cash app, and send the very best gift that you can. And those of you who are tithing to this particular platform, I absolutely appreciate your faithfulness in your tithing. I don't have to repeat again that we don't teach tithing as a commandment and like you're going to be cursed if you don't know that. It's just another means of giving. Tithing is just a method or a means. You can give tithe, you can just give an offering, you can just give a seed or whatever it is that you want to do. Okay, large or small. But for those of you who do tithe, I do appreciate your generosity and your support through the years. We are trying to build this platform and get more and more people involved and engaged in these conversations. I need your help to do so. Please continue to support and do it right now. All right, so I've had a great time today. I hope that you've learned a lot. You've enjoyed yourself. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, you can inbox me if you're one of my Facebook friends. If not, then the email address you see on the screen, you can shoot me an email. I will always respond to you in detail. If you want to get the notes from this particular teaching that we've been doing, you know what? No, you can't get the notes right now. When we finish all 4 sections, I will make those notes available to those of you who would like to have them. And I've put a lot of work and effort into compiling all of these notes and all of this information, so I'm not going to give them away free this time. So I will make them available at the end of the teaching, and if you'd like to get them, then I haven't decided on what you can give in order to purchase them, but you'll be able to purchase it, and I will send it out to you via email, and you'll be able to get all of the notes. Okay? All right, so have an absolutely splendid rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you again on next week as we emerge.